The morning sun blazed over Camp Pendleton, California, turning the training grounds into a furnace. Lieutenant Emma Torres stood at attention with the other instructors, watching the new class of Marine recruits file onto the hand-to-hand combat field. 28 faces, mostly young, mostly confident, all wearing the same determined expression. Emma was used to the stares. At 5'4" and 120 pounds, she didn't look like what most people expected from a Marine Corps martial arts instructor. Her frame was slight, her features delicate. She'd heard the whispers her entire career. Too small, too fragile, too feminine. She'd stopped letting them bother her years ago. Staff Sergeant Marcus Brennan stood beside her, clipboard in hand. He was everything the Marines advertised in their recruiting posters. 6'2", 220 pounds of muscle with a square jaw and a voice that could strip paint. He'd been at Camp Pendleton for 8 years and had a reputation for being hard but fair. He also had a problem with Emma's assignment to his training unit. "All right, listen up." Brennan's voice cut across the field like a whip. The recruits snapped to attention. "Welcome to Advanced Hand-to-Hand Combat Training. I'm Staff Sergeant Brennan. This is Lieutenant Torres. Over the next 6 weeks, we're going to teach you how to survive close-quarters combat, how to neutralize threats, how to stay alive when bullets run out and it's just you and the enemy." Emma watched the recruits' eyes flicker to her, then away. She could read their thoughts. Some were curious, some were confused, a few were already dismissive. Brennan continued. "Lieutenant Torres comes to us from Quantico. She'll be assisting with demonstrations and individual training." The way he said, assisting, made it clear he didn't think much of her contribution. One of the recruits, a broad-shouldered kid from Texas named Kowalski, raised his hand. "Sir, no disrespect, but is the lieutenant going to be doing physical demonstrations?" "Why do you ask, recruit?" Brennan's eyes narrowed. "Just seems like, well," Kowalski glanced at Emma. "No offense, ma'am, but you're pretty small. How are we supposed to learn combat techniques from someone who wouldn't last 10 seconds against an actual enemy combatant?" A few snickers rippled through the group. Emma kept her face neutral. She'd heard worse. Brennan didn't shut it down the way he should have. Instead, he shrugged. "The lieutenant has her credentials. Command assigned her here, so here she is. But you raise a valid point. Real combat isn't about theory, it's about practical application." Emma felt the familiar fire kindle in her chest. Not anger, focus. "Staff Sergeant," she said quietly, "perhaps we should let the recruits see what practical application looks like." Brennan turned to her, one eyebrow raised. "You want to do a demonstration?" "I think it would be educational." Something flashed in Brennan's eyes, not quite malice, but close. He was a traditional Marine, old school in his thinking. Women had their place in the Corps, sure, but not in combat roles, not in his training program. Command had forced Emma on him, and he'd made his resentment clear in a dozen small ways over the past week. "All right," Brennan said slowly. A smile played at the corner of his mouth. "How about this? We'll do an open demonstration, you against. Let's say 5 volunteers. Show these recruits what you've got." The training ground went quiet. 5-on-1 was extreme, even for advanced demonstration. It was a setup, and everyone knew it. Emma met Brennan's eyes. 5 recruits. "No," Brennan said. "Let's make it interesting. 5 of my assistant instructors, all Marines, all combat veterans, all bigger than you." He gestured to a group of men standing at the edge of the field. "Johnson, Martinez, Webb, Crawford, Sullivan, you're up." The 5 men exchanged glances. They were all sergeants, all experienced, all outweighing Emma by at least 80 pounds. Johnson, the smallest of them, was 5'10" and 190 pounds of solid muscle. "Sir," Martinez said, stepping forward, "you want us to spar with the lieutenant all at once." "That's right, non-lethal techniques only, of course. This is a demonstration, not a brawl. But I want these recruits to see realistic combat scenarios. Lieutenant Torres says she's qualified. Let's see it." Emma took a slow breath. This was humiliation disguised as training. Brennan wanted her to fail in front of the recruits, wanted to prove his point that she didn't belong. If she declined, she'd look weak. If she accepted and lost, she'd lose all credibility. But there was a third option. "Wind. Rules of engagement?" Emma asked calmly. "Simple," Brennan said. "They try to subdue you. You try to put them down, tap out when you've had enough." His smile widened. "No shame in knowing your limits, Lieutenant." Emma unbuttoned her uniform jacket and set it aside. Underneath, she wore a tan t-shirt that revealed arms more toned than her sleeves usually showed. She rolled her shoulders, feeling her muscles warm up. "No tap-out necessary, Staff Sergeant. Let's proceed." The 5 Marines spread out in a loose semicircle. They looked uncomfortable, these big men preparing to fight a woman half their size. But they were Marines. They followed orders. The recruits formed a wider circle, watching with a mixture of excitement and second-hand embarrassment. This was going to be ugly. Everyone knew it. Brennan raised his hand. "Ready positions." The 5 sergeants shifted into combat stances. Emma stood still, her hands loose at her sides, her weight balanced. "Begin." Johnson came first, moving in fast with a grab attempt. He outweighed Emma by 90 pounds and had 6 inches of reach on her. To the recruits watching, it looked like a mismatch that would end in seconds. Emma moved. Her body shifted like water, flowing around Johnson's grab. Her hand snapped up, striking a precise nerve cluster in his shoulder. Her foot swept his ankle at the exact moment his weight transferred forward. Johnson's momentum became his enemy. He went down hard, landing flat on his back with a grunt that knocked the air from his lungs. Martinez came next, charging in before Johnson had even hit the ground. Martinez was a boxer, fast hands, powerful strikes. He threw a combination jab-cross-hook textbook technique. Emma slipped inside his guard like smoke. Her elbow struck his solar plexus with surgical precision. As he doubled over, her knee came up to meet his descending face. Not hard enough to break anything, but hard enough to send him stumbling backward, dazed. Webb and Crawford attacked together, trying to use their size advantage to overwhelm her. Webb went high, Crawford went low, a coordinated assault that should have been unstoppable. Emma dropped beneath Webb's grasp, her hand striking the inside of his knee in a nerve strike that made his leg buckle. She rolled over Crawford's back as he lunged, using his own momentum to send him sprawling. As she came up from the roll, her foot caught Webb in the ribs with a snap kick that sat him down hard. Sullivan, the biggest of the 5 at 230, hesitated. He just watched Emma dismantle 4 Marines in less than 15 seconds. His training warred with his disbelief. Emma didn't wait. She closed the distance between them in 2 quick steps. Sullivan threw a desperate punch. Emma caught his wrist, twisted, and used his own weight against him. A basic judo throw, perfectly executed. Sullivan went airborne and landed with a crash that shook the ground. Silence blanketed the training field. 5 Marines lay on the ground, groaning, dazed, defeated. Emma stood in the center, not even breathing hard. She turned to face Staff Sergeant Brennan. "Was that practical enough, sir?" Brennan's face had gone from smug confidence to shocked silence. His mouth opened, then closed. Around the training field, 28 recruits stared with wide eyes, their assumptions shattered in the space of 30 seconds. Johnson sat up slowly, rubbing his shoulder where Emma's strike had temporarily paralyzed the muscle. Martinez was on his hands and knees, shaking his head to clear the dizziness. Webb, Crawford, and Sullivan were picking themselves up, looking at Emma with a mixture of respect and disbelief. Kowalski, the recruit who'd questioned Emma's capabilities, couldn't finish his sentence. Emma retrieved her uniform jacket, slipping it back on with calm precision. "Size and strength matter in combat," she said, her voice carrying across the silent field. "But they're not the only factors. Speed matters, technique matters, understanding leverage and momentum in human anatomy, knowing exactly where and how to strike." She looked at each recruit in turn. "I'm smaller than all of you, weaker than most of you, but I've spent 15 years studying how to overcome those disadvantages." Sullivan got to his feet, rubbing his back where he'd impacted the ground. "Lieutenant, where did you train? That wasn't standard Marine Corps combatives." "You're right, Sergeant. It wasn't." Emma dusted off her hands. "I hold a 6th degree black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, a 5th degree in Krav Maga, and a 4th degree in Judo. I've studied Muay Thai, boxing, and traditional Japanese Jiu-Jitsu. Before I came to Quantico, I spent 3 years training special operations personnel in close-quarters combat." The silence deepened. Brennan's jaw worked, but no sound came out. Martinez stood, wincing. "Special operations, ma'am, which units?" Emma hesitated. Some of her work was classified, but the basic facts were public record. MARSOC primarily, Marine Raiders. Some work with SEALS and Delta when they needed specialized instruction. "Jesus," Webb muttered. "We just got our asses handed to us by a legend." "Not a legend," Emma corrected. Just someone who trained longer and harder because I had to, because people like me don't get the benefit of the doubt. We have to be twice as good to be considered half as competent. She looked directly at Brennan. Staff Sergeant, you set up this demonstration to prove I didn't belong here, to show the recruits that physical presence matters more than skill. But you proved the opposite. You proved that assumptions can get you hurt. That underestimating an opponent because they're small or female or different from what you expect is a potentially fatal mistake. Brennan's face reddened. Lieutenant, I was just... You were trying to humiliate me, Emma said flatly. Let's not pretend otherwise, but here's what's going to happen now. You're going to let me do my job. You're going to treat me like the qualified instructor I am. And you're going to help me teach these recruits that victory in combat comes from intelligence, training, and adaptability, not just from being the biggest person in the fight. The recruits watched the confrontation with rapt attention. This was more than a physical lesson now. This was about respect, about leadership, about what it meant to be a Marine. Brennan stood rigid, his pride warring with reality. Finally, he nodded once. Understood, Lieutenant. Good, Emma turned back to the recruits. Now let's talk about what you just saw. Kowalski, you were concerned about my size. What did you observe? Kowalski straightened. Ma'am, I observed that I was wrong. You moved faster than they could react. You used their strength against them. You knew exactly where to strike. Correct, size gives you options, but it also makes you predictable. Bigger fighters tend to rely on strength. They telegraph their movements because they're used to power carrying them through. Smaller fighters have to be smarter, faster, more precise. Emma gestured to Johnson, who was rotating his shoulder, testing it. Sergeant Johnson, tell the recruits what happened. Johnson grimaced. She hit a nerve cluster in my shoulder, ma'am, temporarily paralyzed the muscle. My whole arm went dead. Then she swept my ankle at the exact moment I was off balance. I was on the ground before I knew what happened. And if this had been real combat? Emma asked. I'd be dead, ma'am, or captured. Emma nodded. The human body has vulnerabilities that don't care about size. Nerve clusters, joint locks, pressure points. A well-placed strike to the throat, the eyes, the groin, the knee, these can neutralize any opponent regardless of their physical advantages. But you have to know where to strike. You have to be fast enough and accurate enough to make it count. She walked among the recruits, meeting their eyes. Over the next 6 weeks, I'm going to teach you these techniques, not so you can showboat, not so you can win bar fights, but so you can survive when everything goes wrong, when you're disarmed, outnumbered, outmatched, when it's just you and your training and the will to live. A hand went up. It was a female recruit, one of only 3 women in the class. Her name tape read Chen. She looked like she might be Chinese-American, small-framed and serious. Yes, recruit, Emma said. Ma'am, how do you deal with people not taking you seriously? I mean, before you prove yourself. Emma smiled, but it was sad around the edges. That's the hardest part, Chen. The combat is easy compared to fighting for respect every single day. People see my size, my gender, and they make assumptions. I've been passed over for assignments, had my qualifications questioned, been told I'm too fragile for this job more times than I can count. She paused, looking out over the assembled faces. You deal with it by being undeniable, by working harder than everyone else, by turning every doubt into fuel, and by never, ever giving them the satisfaction of seeing you quit. Chen nodded, her jaw set with determination. Brennan cleared his throat. Lieutenant, with your permission, I'd like to participate in the training myself. Seems I could learn a few things. Emma met his eyes. The apology was there, unspoken but real. Of course, Staff Sergeant, we're all here to learn. The tension on the field broke. The 5 sergeants who'd been taken down gathered around Emma, asking questions about technique, wanting to understand how they'd been defeated so quickly. The recruits pressed closer, eager now, seeing her not as a fragile woman, but as a master instructor with knowledge they desperately wanted. Emma spent the next hour breaking down the techniques she'd used, demonstrating in slow motion, explaining the anatomy and physics behind each strike. She was patient, thorough, answering every question. The recruits took notes, practiced movements, their respect growing with each passing minute. But as the morning session ended and the recruits headed to the mess hall for lunch, Emma felt the familiar exhaustion settling into her bones. Not physical exhaustion, the demonstration had barely taxed her. It was the emotional weight of having to prove herself yet again, of being tested when her male counterparts were simply accepted. Brennan approached as she gathered her training materials. Lieutenant, I owe you an apology. Yes, you do. He winced at her directness. I was out of line. I let my personal biases cloud my judgment. I thought. Hell, I don't know what I thought. That command was going soft, maybe. That they were checking diversity boxes instead of maintaining standards. And now I see that you're probably the most qualified combatives instructor on this base, and I was too stubborn and stupid to recognize it. He rubbed the back of his neck. I've got 2 daughters, 16 and 14. They both want to join the Corps. I tell them they can do anything, be anything. But I guess I didn't really believe it until today. Emma's expression softened slightly. Staff Sergeant, I don't need you to be perfect. I just need you to be fair. Give me the same respect you'd give any qualified instructor. Let me do my job, that's all I ask. You've got it, ma'am. From here on out, we're a team. Emma nodded. Good, because these recruits deserve the best training we can give them. Both of us working together can provide that. Over the next 2 weeks, Emma threw herself into training the new class. She demonstrated techniques, corrected form, pushed the recruits beyond what they thought were their limits. Brennan, true to his word, treated her with respect and deferred to her expertise in combatives. The recruits responded with enthusiasm. Kowalski, who'd questioned her competence on day 1, became one of her most dedicated students. He stayed after sessions to practice, asking detailed questions about leverage and timing. Chen, the female recruit who'd asked about dealing with doubt, showed a natural aptitude for the techniques. She was quick and smart, using her smaller size as an advantage just like Emma had taught. But not everyone at Camp Pendleton was happy about Emma's success. Colonel Richard Havers commanded the training battalion. He was 58, a career Marine with traditional views about the Corps and its future. He'd served in Desert Storm, Iraq, and Afghanistan, earning his rank through combat leadership and unwavering dedication to Marine Corps values as he understood them. He also believed that women in combat roles were a political decision that weakened the Corps. 2 weeks into Emma's tenure, she was summoned to his office. The summons came through official channels, a formal order to report at 1400 hours. Emma arrived precisely on time in her dress uniform, her ribbons and medals properly displayed. Havers' office was decorated with memorabilia from his 36 years of service. Photos with presidents and generals, unit citations, a flag from Fallujah. Behind his desk hung a large Marine Corps emblem, the eagle, globe, and anchor gleaming. Lieutenant Torres reporting as ordered, sir. Emma stood at attention. Havers looked up from his paperwork. He was thick-necked and gray-haired, with eyes that had seen too much combat to be easily impressed. At ease, Lieutenant. Have a seat. Emma sat, her back straight, her hands folded in her lap. Havers leaned back in his chair, studying her. I've been receiving reports about your training methods. Sir, you put 5 of my instructors on their backs in about 30 seconds. Made quite an impression. I was demonstrating combat techniques, sir. Staff Sergeant Brennan requested a practical demonstration. That's not how he tells it, Havers said. He says he tried to embarrass you and you turned it around on him, made him look like a fool. Emma kept her expression neutral. Staff Sergeant Brennan and I have since reached an understanding, sir. We're working effectively as a team. So I hear. Havers picked up a file from his desk. I've been reading your jacket, Lieutenant. Very impressive. All those black belts, the special operations training, 3 combat deployments, a Bronze Star with Valor. You've certainly been busy. I've served where needed, sir. You've also generated complaints. Did you know that? Havers opened the file. 14 formal complaints over the course of your career. Male service members who felt uncomfortable training under a female instructor. Concerns about physical standards. Questions about whether you received preferential treatment. Emma's jaw tightened. I'm aware of the complaints, sir. Each one was investigated and dismissed. Dismissed, yes, but that doesn't mean they weren't filed. That doesn't mean you haven't created problems everywhere you've been assigned. Havers closed the file. The Marine Corps is about unit cohesion, Lieutenant, about Marines trusting each other without hesitation or doubt. When half the unit questions an instructor's qualifications, that creates friction. With respect, sir, the problem isn't my qualifications. It's the bias some Marines bring to the situation. Bias that disappears once they see what I can do. Does it? Havers leaned forward. Or does it just go underground? Those 5 instructors you embarrassed, you think they're happy about it? You think their ego isn't bruised? You may have won their public respect, but you made enemies doing it. I didn't ask to be challenged, sir. Staff Sergeant Brennan set up that demonstration. I simply met it. By humiliating 5 experienced Marines in front of recruits. Havers shook his head. You should have declined, should have found a way to defuse the situation without making your fellow instructors look incompetent. Emma felt heat rising in her chest. Sir, are you saying I should have lost on purpose, that I should have let them beat me to preserve their pride? I'm saying you should have used better judgment. You could have suggested a different demonstration. One-on-one sparring, technique breakdowns, something that didn't make you look like a superhero and them look like amateurs. They challenged me 5-on-1, sir. I didn't set those terms. But you accepted them, and in doing so you created a situation that reflects poorly on this command. Havers stood, walking to his window. Lieutenant Tors, I'm going to be direct with you. I didn't request you for this assignment. You were sent here by Quantico brass who wanted to prove a point. Women in combat instruction, breaking barriers, progressive thinking. He turned to face her. But I run a training battalion that produces combat-ready Marines. My job is to prepare these young men and women for the hell of war. I don't have time for politics. I don't have patience for instructors who create problems, no matter how qualified they are. Sir, I'm not creating problems. I'm doing my job. Your job is to train Marines, not to prove how tough you are. Your job is to build up these recruits, not tear down fellow instructors. Havers returned to his desk. I'm reassigning you. Emma's breath caught. Sir, you'll finish out this week with the current class, then report to the Logistics Training Command. They need instructors for supply chain management. Non-combat role, more appropriate for your situation. My situation? Emma stood despite not being dismissed. Sir, I'm a combat instructor. I've trained special operations personnel. I have more actual close-quarters combat experience than anyone in this battalion. You're reassigning me to teach logistics. I'm reassigning you to where you'll do the most good with the least friction, Havers said firmly. This isn't a punishment, Lieutenant. It's a practical decision based on unit cohesion and effectiveness. Emma felt the familiar walls closing in. This was her career in miniature. Excel, prove yourself, gain respect, then get shuffled aside because someone in power felt uncomfortable. It didn't matter how good she was. It didn't matter how hard she worked. There was always another Colonel Havers waiting to put her in her place. Sir, I request the opportunity to continue my current assignment. Give me the full 6 weeks with this class. Let me prove that I'm an asset, not a problem. My decision is final, Lieutenant. Then I request permission to appeal to division, sir. Havers' expression hardened. You can appeal if you want, but it'll take weeks to process. By then you'll already be reassigned, and you'll have a reputation as someone who doesn't respect the chain of command. He sat down. Take my advice, Lieutenant. Accept the reassignment gracefully. Do good work in logistics. Stop trying to be something the Corps isn't ready for. Emma stood at attention, her mind racing. She could fight this. She had allies at Quantico, people who believed in her. But Havers was right about one thing: an appeal would take time she didn't have. And fighting it would mark her as difficult, insubordinate, a troublemaker. The injustice of it burned like acid. Request permission to speak freely, sir. Havers sighed. Go ahead. You say the Corps isn't ready for me, but I've been a Marine for 15 years, sir. I've bled for the Corps. I've trained warriors who have gone on to distinguished service. I've proven myself 100 times over. The question isn't whether the Corps is ready for me. The question is whether leaders like you are ready to let go of outdated biases and judge Marines by their performance, not their gender. Havers' face reddened. Careful, Lieutenant. I'm being honest, sir. You've judged me before seeing me teach. You've taken the complaints of men who resented being trained by a woman and given them weight over my actual record. You're punishing me for being competent because my competence makes others uncomfortable. That's not leadership, sir. That's cowardice. The silence in the office was explosive. Havers stood slowly, his hands flat on his desk. Lieutenant Tors, you are dismissed. Report to Logistics Training Command Monday morning at 0800. That's an order. If you speak to me like that again, I'll have you up on insubordination charges. Do you understand? Emma's voice was ice. Perfectly, sir. She saluted, executed a flawless about-face, and walked out of the office with her head high and her heart breaking. Emma spent that evening in her small apartment off base, staring at her phone. She should call her mentor at Quantico, Colonel Sarah Reeves, who'd championed her career. She should file the appeal Havers had mentioned. She should fight. But she was so tired of fighting. Instead, she opened her laptop and began drafting her resignation letter. 15 years of service, and it would end like this. Pushed aside, diminished, sent to teach supply chain management while less qualified male instructors trained warriors. She was 2 paragraphs in when her phone rang. The number was from Camp Pendleton. She almost didn't answer. "Lieutenant Torres," she said. "Ma'am, this is Recruit Chen." The voice was hesitant, scared. "I'm sorry to call you, but I didn't know who else to contact. Something's happened." Emma sat up straight. "What's wrong?" "It's the training class, ma'am. There's been an incident. Some of the guys from the class above ours, they cornered Kowalski and 2 others in the barracks. They were drunk, talking about how our class was being trained by a woman, how we were soft, how we couldn't be real Marines with you teaching us." "Was anyone hurt?" "Kowalski stood up for you, ma'am, said you were the best instructor he'd ever seen. They jumped him, beat him pretty bad. He's in the infirmary now, but ma'am, that's not why I called." "Then why?" "Because the whole class is talking. We heard you're being reassigned. That Colonel Havers is shipping you off to teach logistics because you made the male instructors look bad." Chen's voice cracked. "Ma'am, that's not right. You've taught us more in 2 weeks than we learned in the whole previous month. You've shown us that skill matters more than size, that intelligence matters more than strength. Half the class is women and smaller guys who were told they weren't tough enough. You gave us hope." Emma closed her eyes. "Chen, I appreciate this, but my reassignment is already decided." "Then we want to fight it, ma'am, the whole class. We want to file a petition. We want to go to the base commander. We want to—" "No," Emma said firmly. "You will do no such thing. You're recruits. If you go against Colonel Havers, he'll make your lives hell. He'll wash you out of the program. I won't let you sacrifice your careers for me." "But it's not fair." "Life isn't fair, Chen. The Corps isn't fair. You do your best, you serve with honor, and sometimes you still get knocked down." Emma took a breath. "Listen to me. You finish your training. You become the best Marine you can be. You don't let this derail you." "What about you, ma'am?" Emma looked at her resignation letter on the screen. "I'll figure out my own path." "That's not good enough, ma'am, with respect." Before Emma could respond, she heard voices in the background on Chen's end. Commotion. Then a different voice came on the line. "Lieutenant Torres, this is Staff Sergeant Brennan." "Staff Sergeant, what are you doing with Recruit Chen?" "Trying to stop your whole class from staging a mutiny, ma'am." Brennan's voice was tight with emotion. "Word got out about your reassignment. The recruits are furious. Kowalski got beat up defending your honor, and now I've got 28 Marines in training who want to march on Colonel Havers' office." "Tell them to stand down, Staff Sergeant. That's an order." "With respect, ma'am, I don't think they'll listen, not unless you give them a reason to." He paused. "Are you really not going to fight this?" Emma stared at her resignation letter. The cursor blinked at the end of her last sentence. "I can no longer serve in an organization that values politics over competence." "What's the point in fighting?" she said quietly. "There's always another Colonel Havers waiting, another reassignment, another battle for respect. I'm tired, Brennan." "Yeah, well, join the club. You think I'm not tired? 22 years in the Corps, 3 combat tour. I'm tired every damn day." His voice softened. "But you know what keeps me going? Marines like the ones in this class. Kids who need good training to stay alive. And you're the best I've seen at giving them that training." "Havers doesn't think so." "Havers is a dinosaur who's terrified of change. But he's not the whole Corps, Lieutenant. There are people who see what you're worth, who understand what you bring to the table." Emma heard more commotion in the background, voices rising. "What's happening?" she asked. "Hold on, ma'am." The phone muffled. She heard Brennan shouting for order, heard recruits arguing, then he was back. "Ma'am, you need to get to the base now." "Why?" "Because your recruits just decided to take matters into their own hands. They're marching to the base commander's office. All 28 of them. If they do this without you, they'll be court-martialed." Emma's heart jumped. "Stop them." "I tried. They're not listening. You're the only one who can control them now." Emma grabbed her keys and was out the door in seconds. She made the 20-minute drive to Camp Pendleton in 12, her emergency lights flashing. She badged through the gate and drove straight to the administrative building. A crowd had gathered on the steps. Her recruits, still in their training uniforms, standing at attention. They'd formed ranks, perfect formation, waiting. Emma parked and ran to them. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" Kowalski stood at the front of the formation, his face bruised, one eye swollen shut. "Requesting to speak to the base commander, ma'am. We have a grievance to file." "You have orders to follow, recruit. Get back to your barracks now." "Can't do that, ma'am." Kowalski's good eye was steady, determined. "You taught us that Marines don't leave anyone behind. You're our instructor. You're one of us. We're not letting you get pushed out without a fight." Emma looked at the faces of her recruits. Chen, tears on her cheeks but standing firm. The others, male and female, all wearing the same expression of stubborn loyalty. "You'll be court-martialed," Emma said. "Worth it, ma'am," Chen said. "Your careers will be over." "Then we'll fail with honor," Kowalski said. "You taught us that too." The door to the administrative building opened. Colonel Havers stepped out, his face purple with rage. Behind him came another officer, older, wearing stars on his collar. Major General William Kine, Camp Pendleton's base commander. "What is the meaning of this?" Havers demanded. Kowalski snapped a salute. "Sir, we're here to file a formal grievance regarding the unjust reassignment of Lieutenant Emma Torres. Sir, she is the finest instructor any of us have trained under. Her reassignment is not based on merit but on gender bias. We request a formal review of Colonel Havers' decision." Havers looked like he might explode. "You request? You're recruits. You don't get to request anything. You're all on report for insubordination." "Colonel," General Kine's voice cut through the tension like a blade. "A moment." He walked down the steps, his eyes sweeping over the assembled recruits. Then he looked at Emma. "Lieutenant Torres, I've heard your name before. You trained my son, didn't you? Captain Kine, MARSOC. Emma's mind raced. "Yes, sir, 2 years ago at Quantico. He speaks very highly of you, says you taught him techniques that saved his life in Syria." The general looked at Havers. "Colonel, perhaps you should have consulted with me before making reassignment decisions about high-value personnel." Havers' face went from purple to gray. "Sir, I didn't realize." "You didn't realize that Lieutenant Torres is one of the most decorated close-quarters combat instructors in the entire Corps. You didn't realize that MARSOC has been requesting her for advanced training cycles. You didn't realize that she's exactly the kind of instructor we need to prepare the next generation of Marines." The general's voice was steel. "Or did you just see a woman and make assumptions?" The silence was absolute. General Kine turned to the recruits. "You broke protocol coming here. You violated chain of command, but you did it for the right reasons. That shows loyalty, courage, and judgment, Marine qualities." He looked at Kowalski's bruised face. "Who did that to you, son?" "Recruits from Class 47, sir. They didn't appreciate us being trained by Lieutenant Torres." "Names?" Kowalski rattled off 3 names. The general nodded to an aide who'd appeared behind him. "Have them in my office in 30 minutes. "Yes, sir." The general turned back to Havers. "Colonel, Lieutenant Torres' reassignment is canceled. She will continue her current duties. Furthermore, I want her contract extended. She's staying at Camp Pendleton for a minimum of 2 years to develop a comprehensive combatives program for all training battalions. Is that clear?" Havers looked like he'd swallowed glass. "Yes, sir." "Lieutenant Torres," the general said, "I apologize that you were put in this position. You've earned better from the Corps." Emma found her voice. "Thank you, sir." The general addressed the recruits. "As for you, get back to your barracks and visit your classmate in the infirmary." He stood up for his instructor. "That's Marine loyalty. Be proud of that." "Yes, sir," 28 voices shouted in unison. As the recruits dispersed, chattering excitedly, Emma stood alone on the steps. Brennan approached, a smile on his weathered face. "Guess you're stuck with me for 2 more years, Lieutenant." Emma laughed, a sound of relief and joy. "Guess so, Staff Sergeant." "For what it's worth, those recruits didn't do this because they felt sorry for you. They did it because you're worth fighting for." He extended his hand. "It's an honor to serve with you, ma'am." Emma shook his hand. "The honor is mine." Later that night, Emma deleted her resignation letter. In its place, she began drafting a curriculum for the comprehensive combatives program General Kine had requested. A program that would teach every Marine, regardless of size or gender, how to survive close-quarters combat, how to turn disadvantages into strengths, how to be undeniable. She thought about Kowalski, standing with a black eye and bruised ribs because he'd defended her. About Chen, risking her career to fight for what was right. About 28 recruits who'd seen past her size and gender to recognize her worth. And she thought about all the young Marines who would come after, who would train under her program, who would learn that strength came in many forms. The fight wasn't over. There would be more Colonel Havers in her future, more people who doubted, more battles for respect. But tonight she'd won. Tonight she'd been reminded why she wore the uniform. Not for the colonels or the generals. For the Marines, the ones who believed, the ones who stood up for each other, the ones who understood that being a Marine wasn't about size or gender. It was about heart. And that was something she had in abundance. Emma Torres, Lieutenant, United States Marine Corps, looked at the eagle, globe, and anchor on her wall and smiled. She wasn't fragile. She never had been. And now, finally, the Corps was beginning to understand that.